Fireworks crackled across late-night airwaves when Johnny Carson, at the spry age of 79, leaned forward under the flicker of Studio 33's lights and dropped the bomb that had been hiding behind decades of late-night laughter. He had 8 guests on The Tonight Show he truly loathed. For years, viewers only glimpsed Carson's masterful control, his warm grin, knowing glances, and razor-sharp wit that diffused any on-air tension. But behind those polite quips lay a private ledger of personalities who tested even his iron composure. Tonight, Carson peeled back the curtain, offering an inside look at the moments that made him cringe, sigh, and sometimes regret ever inviting certain folks into his hallowed red chair. What drove him to harbor such intense disdain? And what stories lurked beneath the veneer of that famously genial host? From the very first guest on May 22, 1955, Johnny's Tonight Show had championed the art of conversation. But no matter how smooth his banter, he was only human, and by age 79, he had amassed a dossier of on-camera nightmares. He began with an anecdote about the first time he realized not every star was worth the spotlight. A self-absorbed diva arrived late, demanded a private rehearsal, and treated the studio crew like invisible footnotes in her grand performance. Carson's eyebrows arched in amusement as he described her tirade about the wrong shade of purple floodlight. In that moment, he decided she'd join his Hall of Shame, a club he swore no one else would ever see, but tonight would. With each revelation, Carson's trademark pause amplified the audience's anticipation. He spoke of a motivational speaker whose inspirational monologue felt more like an endurance test. 3 consecutive days of preaching positivity while panicking over minor teleprompter typos. Carson confessed that, by the second night, he found himself longing for a quiet monologue over another excruciating pep talk. Then came the evening he booked a controversial author who arrived armed with scandalous revelations, flared indignantly at every camera angle, and never stopped during commercial breaks. "I couldn't get a word in edgewise," Carson chuckled, shaking his head at the memory. He treated the green room like a rally stage. As the countdown moved toward the 8th and most infamous name, Carson revealed how his irritations sometimes morphed into genuine concern for his own show's legacy. When one combative politician arrived, ready to spar over policy minutiae, Johnny felt the energy shift from playful to combative. He worried that his Tonight Show would become a war zone rather than an oasis of humor. So, with surgical precision, he deflated every attack with affable disinterest, steering the conversation back to lighter fare, but not before quietly vowing never to treat his audiences to such theater again. Tonight's confessions went beyond snappy one-liners and polite deflections. They illuminated Carson's unwavering commitment to quality entertainment and his willingness to hold even the biggest names accountable. By naming the 8 who tested him most, he invited fans to appreciate the craftsmanship behind those seamless 40-minute tapes. In every awkward silence, every forced laugh, he had recognized the risk of letting any guest's ego overshadow the shared humor that defined The Tonight Show. Now, at 79, he offered those inside stories as a final masterclass, proof that the best hosts aren't always smiling, but they learn from every misstep. Next, Carson let slip the name of a self-proclaimed psychic who strutted onto the set wearing a sequined kaftan and crystal bracelets dangling from each wrist. She claimed to channel messages from long-dead Hollywood icons and insisted on a private chat with him before the mic went live. Carson chuckled as he recalled swiveling in his chair, watching her wave a feathered fan and murmur names of celebrities who had passed decades before. Each pronouncement grew more elaborate, tales of secret affairs, untold scandals, and cosmic warnings, until even the band leader exchanged uneasy glances. When she finally turned to him and demanded he call out a name from the beyond, Carson said, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but tonight's astral forecast calls for laughter, not ghost stories." He deftly segued back into his monologue, leaving the audience in stitches and the psychic sputtering at her failed seance under studio lights. The 6th guest on his blacklist was a flamboyant rock star whose contract writer included a request for 9 bodyguards, 3 fresh towels per hour, and a private drum kit backstage, just in case a spontaneous jam session struck him between interview segments. Carson grinned as he described the surreal scene, a phalanx of muscle-bound security filling the hall, while crew members tiptoed around a velvet divan where the musician demanded to practice his guitar licks before stepping on stage. In mid-riff run, the artist paused and insisted the show's theme song be replaced with one of his unreleased tracks, leading to frantic negotiations that almost scrapped the scheduled taping. Carson's patience cracked when the guard leader asked for a moment of silence to honor the creative spirit. With perfect comedic timing, Johnny tilted his head and muttered, "Silence is golden," right up until showtime, and cut straight back to the late-night banter that generations would remember. Then came the seventh name, a once-revered dramatic actor whose recent career slump left him desperate for any spotlight. Carson saved his harshest critique for this episode. The actor's performance was so overwrought that he seemed unaware of the live audience, delivering stilted Shakespearean lines in a booming voice meant for ancient amphitheaters rather than a late-night talk show. He declaimed monologues about existential despair, extolling the tragedy of modern life, while Carson sat stone-faced behind his desk. The audience sat in stunned silence until Johnny straightened his tie and replied, "Sir, if I wanted to feel this tragic, I'd have booked the weatherman." His dry remark shattered the tension, but behind the laughter lay Carson's frustration. He had invited an artist known for subtle nuance, and instead got a caricature of melodrama that derailed the show's flow. Finally, Johnny revealed the eighth guest, the name that prompted the biggest collective gasp. It was a household name, a high-profile game show host famous for his booming voice and larger-than-life persona. Carson admitted he regretted the booking from the moment the guest's private limo idled outside Studio 33. The host swaggered in, cracking jokes about that night's ad reads, and proceeded to regale the staff with stories of rigged games and backstage politics. In a startling departure from on-air civility, he took swipes at network executives and downplayed Johnny's own accomplishments, as if auditioning for a fresh platform. Carson's eyes twinkled with a mix of amusement and annoyance as he recalled cutting the segment short, quipping, "Well, folks, that's all the game I've got tonight," before pivoting to an impromptu sketch. Off camera, he quietly instructed producers never to book him again, though network memos reveal that the decision was mutual. As the audience roared at Johnny's revelations, he leaned back and offered a final reflection. Every guest brought something unique to the table, some magic, some madness, he said. But when a personality outshines the very show that hosted it, you know you've treaded into dangerous territory. In naming these eight, he didn't aim to shame them forever. Instead, he celebrated The Tonight Show's ability to adapt, to steer through awkward moments with wit, and to protect the delicate balance between host and guest. At 79, Johnny Carson reminded viewers that a great talk show is as much about what doesn't air, the silent tensions, the behind-the-scenes negotiations, as it is about the laughter and applause. And by confessing his 8 least favorite interviews, he gifted his audience one last insider's tour of the late-night landscape he had mastered for decades. In the days following his candid disclosure, late-night talk show history shifted in subtle, yet unmistakable ways. Television critics dissected every syllable of Carson's confession, marveling at the precision with which he recalled each ill-fated encounter. Sunday morning programs devoted full segments to the 8 names he pronounced, juxtaposing archival clips with off-air anecdotes to illustrate Carson's long-simmering frustrations. Fan mail flooded NBC studios, some praising his honesty, others accusing him of impropriety in airing ancient grievances. Through it all, Johnny remained characteristically reticent, offering no further comment beyond a wry smile during rehearsals. Meanwhile, performers across Hollywood averted their eyes when they heard about the infamous list. Agents quietly reconsidered reservations, and the mere mention of being Carson-approved gained sudden currency. Studio executives called back old bookings, seeking assurances that their clients would be 1,000% Carson-friendly before returning to the red chair. In this new era, a subtle shift in power emerged. Guests realized they were the ones auditioning, vying for Johnny's elusive blessing rather than the other way around. The Tonight Show had always commanded respect, but now the host himself had organically elevated his own terms of engagement. Inside the labyrinthine corridors of NBC, internal memos circulated assessing the long-term fallout. Research departments flagged potential repeat offenders while bookers compiled a new protocol for pre-interview screenings. Talent coordinators introduced compatibility calls, ensuring that proposed guests understood the boundaries of Carson's brand of humor. Scripts were rewritten to include extra buffer segments, a song, a skit, or an impromptu dance number, designed to ease tension whenever a high-maintenance personality sat beneath those studio lights. In essence, Johnny's 8 revelations became a blueprint for safeguarding late-night civility. Industry insiders observed that the shift wasn't limited to Carson's domain. Rivals on other networks felt the tremors too, re-examining their own guest lineups for potential troublemakers. Producers of afternoon talk shows and weekend specials adopted similar vetting measures, citing Carson's list as proof that no amount of celebrity magnetism should ever overwhelm entertainment itself. Suddenly, the art of booking guests was less a numbers game and more a delicate negotiation, with hosts and producers collaborating closely to maintain a safe, witty, and smooth-flowing experience. Carson himself, meanwhile, seemed to savor the afterglow. He incorporated subtle nods into his monologues, references to nice guests who just know when to let a host host. His trademark deadpan glances became marginally sharper, a silent reminder that he still reigned supreme even at 89. During rehearsals, he'd pause mid-line and chuckle. That's an audience-friendly zone, as if signaling to cast and crew, we've all learned something tonight. His off-air routine of reciting limericks took on new verses inspired by modern celebrity foibles, each delivered with consummate timing. Critics ranged from delight to disdain. Some hailed Carson's list as a revelatory masterclass in talk show mastery, while others decried it as a petty exercise in public shaming. Editorials debated whether such candor belonged in prime time or should have been buried in memoirs. Yet ratings for his retrospective special soared, proving that viewers crave these candid confessions as much as they did perfectly pitched punchlines. Even decades later, streaming platforms rank the episode as one of Carson's most watched moments, cementing its place in television folklore. As the interview aged into legend, Carson's revelations transcended mere gossip. They evolved into a guidebook for hosts everywhere, a testament to the delicate alchemy of mirth and news, charm and challenge. Every budding talk show host now studies Carson's technique, how he wielded kindness and sharpness in equal measure, how he maintained his own neutrality, and how he never forgot that the host's chair was sacred ground. The 8 names he disliked remain etched in late-night lore, but their true legacy is the unshakable standard they set. Johnny's candid list became late night's timeless guide truly. Long after the curtain fell on that historic episode, Johnny Carson's 8 infamous names took on lives of their own, circulating in memoirs and water-cooler gossip for decades. Comedy writers sneaked in references to Carson's red chair blessings and vetoes, crafting inside jokes and scripts for Saturday Night Live, Late Night with David Letterman, and later, The Daily Show. Talk show hosts began to treat their guest lists as strategic assets, studying Carson's standards to avoid booking misfits. Even in the golden age of streaming, podcasters cite the episode as evidence that celebrity aura can collapse under its own weight without careful curation. Carson's simple act of naming names became a cautionary tale, a backstage manual for how to protect an audience's trust. Networks also revised their approach. By the early 2000s, booking protocols included informal personality profiles and backstage etiquette guides, measures directly inspired by Carson's revelations. Memo lines in contractors' guidelines often reference the Carson principle, meaning that if a prospective guest triggers more concern than excitement among staff, the segment is scrapped. A generation of showrunners testifies that this principle saved their programs from on-air disasters. Writers' rooms convened mock interviews to role-play awkward guest exchanges, ensuring every possible insult or awkward pause was neutralized. As Carson once quipped, "We're not running a therapy for the celebrity-troubled souls. We're here to entertain." Meanwhile, fans never let the memory fade. Online forums called Carson's Chair debate week after week which modern celebrities might earn a spot on his disliked list. Would a diva singer with notorious tantrums? A reality TV star famed for breaking into tears? Or perhaps a bombastic influencer with a penchant for hijacking interviews? These fan polls generate lively speculation, often resulting in top 10 lists of contemporary Carson cautionaries. In many ways, this participatory culture keeps Carson's spirit alive, reminding viewers that even in an age of social media, seasoned hosts can command respect by balancing warmth with discretion. The legacy carries weight beyond entertainment. Corporate communication seminars and public speaking workshops now reference Carson's reveal when instructing executives on audience engagement. The lesson is clear. No matter how brilliant your message, if you monopolize the stage or dismiss supporting voices, you risk alienating your audience. This principle guides interactions from keynote addresses to webinar panels. According to one speaker coach, an 88-year-old Carson would nod approvingly at modern presenters who open with empathy, segue into collaboration, and close with gratitude, practices that mirror his own instincts on The Tonight Show. In the classroom, film and media courses analyze the episode as part of curricula. Professors screen the clip highlighting Carson's 8 guests, then facilitate discussions on power dynamics, performer-producer relationships, and the ethics of public disclosure. Students compare Carson's candidness with subsequent tell-all memoirs by hosts like Arsenio Hall, Oprah Winfrey, and Ellen DeGeneres, evaluating how each navigates the line between transparency and tact. Essays argue that Carson's timing, confessing near retirement, allowed him to speak freely without harming future bookings. His farewell confession came across less as bitterness and more as a gracious transfer of wisdom. Today, streaming services even feature special retrospectives on late-night television, often leading with Carson's legendary late career interview. Commentary tracks by modern hosts such as Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert praise Carson's skill, acknowledging that a major ingredient in his recipe was a zero-tolerance policy for on-air ego. In roast specials and anniversary broadcasts, celebrities fondly recount Carson's gentle but firm guiding hand, how he could disarm unruly guests with a raised eyebrow, a well-timed deadpan, or a simple pivot back to humor. Those stories echo especially when hosts face viral interview gaffes, proving time and again that Carson's playbook remains irreplaceable. As velvet curtains fall, Carson's legacy endures in silence. But Carson's influence extended far beyond the glowing screens of late-night television. In boardrooms and keynote podiums, corporate trainers now quote his wisdom to executives learning to read a room. Never let your presence eclipse the purpose, they say, echoing Carson's own mantra about hosting with humility. Leadership conferences screen clips of his most deft pivots, showing how a well-timed joke or a gracious segue can restore goodwill when tensions flare. Even TED Talk coaches draw parallels between hosting a talk show and leading a high-stakes presentation. Both require empathy, preparation, and the courage to cut short any spotlight-hungry performance that doesn't serve the audience's needs. Meanwhile, universities across the country have added the Carson case study to their media and communications courses. Professors compile archival footage, behind-the-scenes interviews, and journal articles into comprehensive modules that dissect each of the 8 guests who tested Carson's composure. Students analyze how he used contrast framing, juxtaposing polite banter with subtle disapproval to preserve his show's tone. Role-play exercises challenge aspiring hosts to navigate impassioned monologues or off-book demands, guiding them to craft transitions that balance respect with control. Graduates often credit these lessons with giving them the confidence to take charge of any live format. In the world of podcasting, dozens of shows pay homage to Carson's red chair revelations. Hosts of late-night legends and Behind the Velvet Ropes revisit the 8 ill-fated interviews, inviting pop culture historians to weigh in on how each guest's demands or missteps could have derailed the show. Listeners send in their own stories of oddball interviews they've hosted, ranging from nervous authors who refuse to make eye contact to influencers who live-stream the green room without permission. These anecdotes underscore that even in the digital age, the art of conversation remains a delicate dance, one that Carson perfected through decades of trial and error. Television networks, recognizing the enduring fascination, have commissioned mini documentaries titled Carson's Cautionary Tales. In these specials, former producers reveal the closed-circuit battles to protect Carson's brand, discussing everything from assignment of seating charts to scripted fallback segments. They recount late-night meetings where executives nervously debated whether to offer a diva guest another take or to cut her loose altogether. Each narrative thread reinforces the same lesson Carson taught. that a host's credibility hinges as much on who sits in the chair as on the banter beneath the lights. Even the world of live performance feels Carson's aftershock. Comedy festivals now feature workshops called The Gentle Art of the Pivot, teaching stand-ups how to recover when a heckler tries to hijack their set. Theater directors borrow Carson's approach of buffer moments, short monologues, musical interludes, or interactive bits that give performers time to regroup if a scene goes off rails. Musicians studying concert etiquette cite his grace under pressure, noting how he seamlessly transformed an unruly entrance into a memorable comedy bit without derailing the show. Ironically, some of the 8 disfavored guests later became case studies in redemption. One rock star, infamous for his security entourage, returned years later with a stripped-down acoustic set and a sincere apology, earning Carson's belated praise and a rare second invitation. The dramatic actor, after whittling his monologues down to humorous anecdotes, received applause rather than awkward silence on his comeback appearance. These redemptive arcs highlight Carson's capacity for forgiveness and adaptability, a reminder that even the highest of reputations can evolve with humility. In private conversations, Carson's closest collaborators reflect on the man behind the mischievous grin. They remember how he'd rehearse limericks at dawn, not for broadcast, but to sharpen his timing. They recall his insistence on staff morale, sliding chocolate bars into writers' desks after rough guests, or spontaneously joining crew members for tacos at midnight. Through these gestures, Carson demonstrated that compassion and candor can go hand in hand, cementing his legacy as both a consummate professional and a genuinely warm-hearted mentor. As the decades pass, the story of Johnny Carson naming the 8 guests he hated has transcended mere celebrity gossip. It stands as a timeless lesson in the power of gracious leadership, the importance of boundaries, and the art of preserving trust under bright lights. And so, long after show tapes have been digitized and streaming platforms archive every episode, Carson's red chair remains the ultimate symbol, a seat of honor that commands respect, fosters laughter, and reminds us that true mastery lies in knowing when to welcome a guest and when to send them gently on their way to end the years since Carson's extraordinary confession. His influence has quietly shaped not just television, but every arena where conversation matters. Corporate leaders now study clips of his seamless pivots when negotiating boardroom crises, memorizing the precise moment he shifted from tense monologue to a lighthearted aside, reminding everyone that human connection trumps raw ego. Public speakers credit his knack for defusing tension with a single well-timed smile, and they train themselves to scan an audience for the same spark Carson detected before launching a joke or story. Even diplomats preparing for sensitive talks watch his Tonight Show footage to learn how he navigated bombastic guests without losing his composure. On college campuses, communication scholars dissect his final late-night special as required viewing. They point to his strategic use of contrast framing, juxtaposing a guest's grandiosity with the mundane realities of show business to reveal the absurdity of unchecked self-importance. In seminar rooms, students reenact pivotal moments: the psychic's botched seance, the rock star's security entourage, the actor's bombastic monologue. Through role-playing, they discover how meaningful transitions, whether a chuckle, a raise of an eyebrow, or a deft segue, can restore balance to any dialogue. Graduate theses even explore Carson's method of building empathy through shared laughter, arguing that his gift was less about punchlines and more about fostering a communal space where disagreements dissolve under genuine warmth. Back at NBC, new talk show hosts and producers alike still reference memos that originated with Carson's own booking guidelines. These internal documents, now casually dubbed the Chair Code, remind talent bookers to vet each prospective guest for collaborative spirit as much as star power. Before a guest's booking is finalized, casting teams review personality profiles, theatrical demos, even behind-the-scenes interviews, seeking clear evidence that a candidate values partnership over platform. These checks ensure that The Tonight Show remains a haven where audiences tune in for camaraderie rather than conflict. Carson's legacy survives in every careful email to a new celebrity, in every backstage discussion about tone, and in every cue card that prompts a host to steer conversations with tact. In the digital age, Creators on platforms like Twitch and YouTube borrow from Carson's red chair ethos when engaging live audiences. Streamers facing disruptive trolls emulate his calm responses, engaging with humor rather than hostility, then swiftly redirecting to community-friendly content. Podcasters incorporate buffer segments between interviews and listener calls, mirroring Carson's strategy of using musical interludes to reset the room. Even virtual event hosts use short pre-recorded sketches or live reading breaks to maintain flow, inspired by how Carson balanced spontaneity with structure. Across these varied formats, the core lesson endures. When a host protects the space for viewers to laugh, learn, or simply unwind, they honor Carson's unwritten code. When younger comedians share the stage at festivals, they often recount stories of Carson's final cameo specials, how his red hair and nimble wit belied the razor-sharp mind that scrutinized every word in his iconic monologues. They marvel at how, in a single career-spanning episode, he reframed awkward encounters into timeless lessons on decorum and resilience. For many, the revelation of his 8 least favorite guests was not a grudging confession, but a masterclass on leadership through humor. It reminded them that true confidence is not measured by popularity, but by the courage to name transgressions and yet offer a path forward. Johnny Carson left us in that special moment not with a grudge, but with a gift, the knowledge that hosting is a craft requiring both heart and discipline. As generations of entertainers, speakers, and leaders continue to study his work, they discover that his greatest trick was never a magic gag or a perfectly timed punchline. It was his unwavering commitment to the audience's experience. At 79, his candid reflections distilled decades of late-night lore into an enduring blueprint for gracious command of any stage. And so, long after the lights dim and cameras turn away, Carson's final lesson remains. Keep your space welcoming, your humor kind, and your boundaries clear, and you will earn the respect of every guest and every listener who takes a seat in your chair.